The Korean Peninsula is heading toward 80 years of division. It is home to two worlds that have lived without understanding each other. Division is not just an event in history. It is a reality that permeates the daily lives of people in South and North. Two societies that share the same language and gaze upon the same land, yet have lived under different systems and memories. We need to ask ourselves how well we know each other across the dividing line. Now in North Korea is seeking answers to this simple question. It is doing so by listening to the stories of Korean Peninsula residents living in the two Koreas. North Korean defectors living in South Korea are always mentioned when discussing unification. But we must understand them better. Unification that came first. This phrase has been used as a symbol of hope and a policy direction for many years. Korean unification is not achieved by slogans alone. It is forged in the everyday life we share together. It is also essential to understand both North Korean defectors and North Korean residents. The first speaker is Jin Lee, who worked as an AP correspondent and bureau chief in Pyongyang. She experienced the daily lives of North Korean, the role of media, and the complex realities of regime. Jin Lee's testimony is abundantly clear. North Korea enjoys Tureju bread, and North Koreans were genuinely delighted when Gangnam Style gained global fame. The second speaker, Dr. Park So-im from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, explains North Korean defectors' social adaptation from the perspective of reciprocity. The reciprocity she describes demands a redesign of relationship. Rather than focusing on what South Korean society gives defector, she confidently proposes that the true starting point for genuine social integration lies in asking what we can create together with them. The third voice belongs to Park Eun-ah, the North Korean defector and researcher pursuing a PhD in political science in the United States with a focus on refugees. Through her academic work, she is rewriting the narratives of the people like herself. She will undoubtedly serve as a role model for youth with North Korean backgrounds in South Korea. Jin Lee, Park So-im, Park Eun-ah. Their perspectives may differ, but they all convey one common message. In this session, we will again confirm the true unification on the Korean Peninsula begins with understanding people, not with the policy. Today we are gonna listen to Ms. Jin Lee, 이진 선생님, on North Korean and her experience and her expertise on North Korea. The floor is all yours.
Thank you. So my name is Jin Lee, but actually I have several different names because my Korean name is Lee Jun-hee, but nobody calls me that. My family in Korea, they all call me Jin-hee. And of course, in North Korea, I had another name, which was Ri Jin-hee. So depending on where I am, I go by different names, but in the United States, I'm known as Jean. So I am a second generation Korean American. I was born and raised in the state of Minnesota here in the United States. And I should mention that I was raised in a very tight-knit Korean American community. And part of the reason I became interested in North Korea was that many of the families that I grew up with had their roots in North Korea. And I think this is very interesting because when you think about many of those refugees who left, they fled the fighting in North Korea, they migrated to South Korea. And in many ways, South Korea was not their home, and many of them continued on to the United States. So one interesting thing to note is that many of our communities here in the United States, our Korean American communities, have ties to North Korea. Now, my family is from Seoul. They're from South Korea. But I think every Korean family probably has some family in North Korea, including myself. I will tell you that one of the inspirations for me was our closest friends in Minnesota growing up. And we are grieving the passing of my friend's father, who passed away last week, Dr. Kyu Hyun Wang. He was born in North Korea, in Kaesong, and I grew up with the story of how he was a teenager when his family sent him south for safety. And then, of course, during the war, the border closed. So he ended up on the South Korean side, never saw his parents again, and then migrated, became, was essentially an orphan in South Korea, but managed to survive, made his way to the United States, became an American, and raised a family in the United States, and went back to North Korea as a Korean American doctor and found his younger sister. So I wrote about that reunion of what we call a divided family when I was a young journalist. And I was thinking about that and sharing that story again with his passing at the age of almost 90, 89 last week. And so that, with a heavy heart, I'm remembering one of these original stories from my own personal community. But that's just to explain that as a Korean American, in some ways we grow up with these stories about the families left behind and the connection that we have to North Korea. So I grew up with this curiosity about that northern half of the country that is part of our heritage. And I think as we've watched South Korea blossom and really grow over the decades, I've seen it, of course, throughout my own life as well. And as we've watched North Korea grow more isolated in the process, I think I have been drawn to this call or this challenge to shed some light on this very hidden society. First as a journalist, which was my professional background, and then later as a policy analyst, which is what I do now. I will say that North Korea is one of the least understood, one of the most misunderstood, and one of the most underestimated countries in the world. And I think that lack of understanding has had and will have enormous consequences for our global security. And I think it means that the people of North Korea also, it's not just the security threat, which we hear a lot about, but I think it also means that the people of North Korea remain very overlooked and that they are very disconnected from the outside world. And I think as a journalist and as a policy analyst, I try to focus not only on the threat that the regime poses, which is certainly what they want us to see, it's part of their strategy, but I also try to focus as much as I can, because I've had such unusual access inside North Korea. I try to focus on the people of North Korea and what the leadership's policies mean for them on a daily basis. So that is really, as a journalist, I've always tried to look for the stories that are not told and what country has more of a hidden society for us than North Korea.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your experience and your opinion on North Korea, and then how to perceive and how to understand North Korea, and your say motivation, starting point for being a North Korea focused journalist, and then now is policy analyst and expert. With the best friend, father, his story, it's just amazing, and you just said. He actually went back as a medical doctor, and then contribute to this health situation in North Korea, and found his younger sister. And then
Yes.
could you tell me a little bit more about their story, and then what happened to this brother and sister, separated for quite a long time?
For us in America, the pain of the divided families is something, this is a story that I grew up with. So I always grew up with this story that his family was in North Korea. He created a new life. I always found it fascinating because we were raised as Americans. I will tell you that my friend, his children, they're very American, don't speak Korean. We grew up with our heritage, but of course, at that time when we were growing up in America, it's not like today where everybody wants to.
Yeah, I mean, Midwest, Minnesota, we are talking about, right?
Yes, and our families were the first families in Minnesota. It's very different today. There are a lot of Koreans in Minnesota, and there's so much awareness of everything related to South Korea globally, right? South Korea, everybody's obsessed with everything Korean. But for us, it was very difficult to maintain our language and our culture. Our parents sent us to Korean school, but so we always knew that his family and that he left his family behind. I was very curious. The time when I really asked him to sit down and tell me the entire story was in 2000, almost exactly, oh my gosh, 25 years ago, right? Because if you remember, that was when we had the first inter-Korean summit. And that was when I was just starting out as a foreign correspondent. And I wanted to share a little bit of what this inter-Korean summit, the meeting of the leader of North Korea and the leader of South Korea, would mean for somebody whose family was divided. So that was when I sat down with him to hear his story. So it was a fascinating story in the sense that they're so synchronized with the parades and the performances. But I did find that they were very opinionated, as long as you didn't ask them about their leadership. So they know when they can, what they can talk about and what they cannot talk about.
Sure.
But I think that I really valued the opportunity to learn in the process of trying to turn me into a North Korean. I could really learn more about their culture, what it is they took pride in, what, the quirks about their language. And I always explain that, for example, when you go into a restaurant in North Korea, what you say from the beginning to the end is completely different than what we would say in South Korea. So it was like I had to learn an alternate dialect or language, but also an alternate culture. And what I will say, for example, is what I ate in North Korea was entirely different than what we think of as North Korean food in South Korea. And so one of the things I'm interested in is making sure that we document and share how their culture, pop culture, their food culture, all of these different parts of daily life are evolving in North Korea in ways that we are not capturing because we're not there. Of course, I will say that defectors are an incredible, escapees and defectors are an incredible resource for that. And I would encourage them to share that, for them to tell us what their daily lives are like, because just like South Korea, it keeps evolving. The language keeps evolving. And I think it's important for us to capture that and record that.
Yeah, then what about their dreams, lifetime goals? And then I think it's in South Korea, the United States, or say Singapore, UK, France, the new generation has new dream. Of course, I want to be rich, I want to be healthy, I want to find a good partner, on and on and on. Scientists or say prime minister, and doctors and an athlete. I think you met many people in North Korea, and especially young generation too. And then what are their say lifetime goal? And then I think it's of course they have different value system a little bit, goals. And then do you remember any interesting goal of lifetime, from when you talk to the young people in 2010s?
Yeah, one of the interesting things is, of course, they were so interested to know more about my life, both in South Korea and in the United States. And so that, I think, was whenever I was able to bring, so for many years, we weren't allowed to bring phones into North Korea, our own phones. We had to lock them up in a locker at the airport in Pyongyang. I didn't bring I usually left my phone in Beijing. But I was able to bring, for many years, I was able to bring a device that didn't have a phone function. It was an iPod Touch. So it's a little bit, it's like a little iPad, right? So I was able to bring that because it didn't have a phone function. And I would load photos onto it. And they would always they loved the iPod Touch to look at what my phone, this device. First of all, they're interested in the technology, but then also my photos. They really wanted to, it just makes you realize that just like we're curious about them, they're so curious about us. And I think I represent what we call kind of like, just like I was saying, I sometimes imagine who would I have been if my family had been in North Korea. I think they also look at me and imagine, who would I have been if I had been in South Korea or the United States? And I think that curiosity was always really fascinating. And one of the questions, or when I would ask the North Koreans, where would you go if you could go to South Korea? And 100% of the time they would say, I want to go to Jeju-do. So they grow up with this idea, just like we, and I think South Koreans often say, I will go to Baekdusan.
Right.
The North Koreans would say, I want to go to Jeju-do. So it's very interesting that they also have these kinds of dreams about what it would be like if Korea were unified, and where, I'm always curious, where would they want to go? I think that they had a lot of the elites have more exposure to South Korea than we think, right? Of course, we can't generalize, because the scale of the range of experiences in North Korea is much broader than we give them credit for. But one of the interesting things, of course, is that many elites do, before the border was closed, spent quite a bit of time abroad, and their first. When I was in Beijing and I would meet with North Korean officials, they would always want to meet at Tu Le Jour, which is a South Korean, the South Korean bakery. Yeah. And I always found that interesting, that that's where the North Koreans wanted to meet, because that's very much but to them, if they're abroad, anything South Korean is more familiar or more enticing than anything that is not. So that kind of thing was interesting to me. And I also, there was an interesting episode during that time, Psy and Gangnam Style was really popular. And for some reason, on my iPod Touch, I had that one song on my phone, Gangnam Style, because back then it was popular, and it wasn't for the Norwegians, but my friends, the whole world loved that song.
That's right.
And so, but for some reason, it kept going off. It kept playing automatically by itself on my phone, on my iPod Touch. And finally, I let the North Koreans listen to it. And I told them, this is the #1 song right now in the world. And they were so proud in a weird way. They said, oh, a Korean person wrote the #1 song in the world. And so I think that those are kinds of insights that I take with me, that despite the rhetoric, despite the official policies, there's a lot of curiosity about South Korea, some of a sense of pride, right? These are the kinds of things that we may not hear because we don't have much interaction with Koreans apart from the propaganda.
Right. All right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's excellent, the experience, to listen to you. And then you are a journalist. At the same time, you are a North Korea expert, and then analyst, thinker, I can say. If you are participating in National Geographic or Discovery Channel or the BBC documentary series making on North Korea, what are the most, say, intriguing, from your point of view, based upon your experience in a subject? What do you recommend?
So I will say that the area that I'm spending most of my time on right now is the North Korean hackers. We call them the
hackers.
Yes. And the reason is it's not, so I have a podcast for the BBC called The Lazarus Heist. It's a narrative series, and we've had 2 seasons, and we're working on a bonus episode right now. And I like to say that I try to explain that I am not a cybersecurity expert. I am looking at this because we need to look at where the money is coming from to fund the nuclear program, because that nuclear program really is the threat that could affect all of us. It is the elephant in the room. It's very hard to look at anything or discuss anything about North Korea unless we address the nuclear program, right? So I'm very interested in how are they financing, how are they paying for it? Now, this investigation comes out of my time in North Korea, because while I was there in the early years of Kim Jong-un's rule, right, I was there for all of his early milestones.
So let's get started. Today, we hosting Dr. So-in Park, a student scientist at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. She is going to make a presentation on social support and North Korean refugees adaptation in South Korea. Dr. Park, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Dr. Peck. Thank you for inviting me to present on the role of social support in the adaptation of North Korean refugees. I wanted to share a little bit about my background before we dive into the topic. I began my medical practice as a Korean medicine doctor, 한의사 in Korean, in 2011. After graduating from college, I completed an internship and residency at the National Medical Center in Seoul. The National Medical Center is a government-owned medical institution where many North Korean refugees seek medical treatment. This was my first interaction with this population, and at that time, I had very limited knowledge about North Korea or North Korean refugees. Typically, a medical consultation begins with identifying the chief complaints and determining when and how the symptoms started. In consultations with North Korean refugees, they often shared their migration experiences, describing how they lived in North Korea, how they lived in China, and how they migrated to South via many countries. Like many South Koreans, I was not familiar with these stories, so I pursued a master's degree at the University of North Korean Studies to better understand this population. My experiences with North Korean refugees transformed my entire career path, shifting my focus from improving individual health from a clinical perspective to enhancing the health of marginalized populations through a public health approach. So I completed my doctoral degree at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health in 2021, and I'm currently working as a junior faculty member at the same school. So refugees are more likely to experience mental health problems such as depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and suicide attempts. Obviously, poor mental health leads to difficulties in adaptation among refugees. What causes poor mental health? Studies suggest that traumatic experiences before or during migration can lead to mental health problems. North Korean refugees may have experienced trauma when they were in North Korea. Some examples of such trauma include religious persecution, physical abuse, rape, and imprisonment. In one study where I conducted secondary data analysis, the research team compiled a list of 39 traumatic events that North Korean refugees may have experienced or have heard of in North Korea. They recruited about 300 North Korean refugees and asked whether they had personally experienced those events. For example, if an individual was imprisoned by themselves, we would consider that as experiencing one direct trauma. On average, individuals reported experiencing 1.2 events directly in North Korea. In contrast, if they report hearing that someone in the neighborhood was raped and witnessing a public execution in North Korea, we count that they were exposed to 2 instances of indirect trauma. On average, the study population experienced 3 indirect trauma events. These average numbers may seem very small, like 1 or 2 or 3, but for many non-refugee populations, the score would be nearly 0. Exposure to direct or indirect trauma in North Korea can result in poor mental health even after 2 or 3 decades of living in South Korea. In other words, the impact can be long-lasting and pervasive. This is not the end, although we won't have enough time to discuss the trauma experienced during migration in detail. Many North Korean refugees who hide within local communities in China endure various forms of trauma, including fears of deportation and intimate partner violence experienced by trafficked women, among others. Experiencing trauma can lead to post-traumatic stress symptoms, commonly referred to as, in the y-axis, PTSS. Constantly experiencing symptoms such as negative mood changes, repetitive intrusive memories, or nightmares or flashbacks can significantly increase the risk of developing more severe mental health problems. We discussed indirect trauma in the previous slide. In this figure, we can see a positive association between the number of indirect trauma events and PTSS. This graph shows that individuals who had witnessed or heard of traumatic events, excluding direct exposure, exhibit higher levels of PTSS. However, there is a factor that moderates the magnitude of the association, which is acculturative stress. Acculturative stress refers to the various psychological stresses that individuals experience when adjusting to a new culture. As you can see from the red line, individuals with high levels of acculturative stress who find adjustment in South Korea very stressful, they tend to exhibit higher PTSS scores as they experience more of the indirect trauma. In contrast, for individuals with low levels of occurrative stress, the slope of the PTSS scores decreases. Now, experiencing indirect trauma is unchangeable. It's an inevitable condition they already experienced. You cannot change their past traumatic experiences. But occurrative stress is happening now, so it is modifiable. To improve the mental health of North Korean refugees, reducing their occurrative stress can be the way to improve their mental health. Then what types of occurrative stress do North Korean refugees experience? I conducted a qualitative study in 2019 with 30 North Korean refugees and 20 South Koreans to understand the social interactions in these two groups. Within the box in the center, we can see the type of occurrative stress reported by North Korean refugees. Here up here, culture shock caused by different communication styles or social norms is a significant source of occurrative stress. As these individuals often come to South Korea alone, here loneliness or social isolation, these contribute to occurrative stress. Many people, especially those who have left loved ones in North Korea, feel guilty about living in comfort while their remaining family members in North Korea struggle to survive. Although social discrimination against North Koreans has decreased over the years, they still feel socially discriminated, which they believe contributes to difficulties in finding jobs. Many North Korean refugees sought to overcome occurrative stress by exchanging social support with family, friends, and neighbors. Of course, not all occurrative stress can be alleviated through social support. However, receiving emotional appraisal or instrumental support helps reduce occurrative stress. Because North Korean refugees are often viewed as a vulnerable population, we believe it is natural for them to receive support from the South Korean government, organizations, or individuals. This support will be essential to their adjustment. It is also natural for North Korean refugees who settled earlier to help newcomers from North Korea. However, I found this blue part very interesting. We often assume that the interaction between South Koreans and North Korean refugees is unidirectional, with assistance flowing from South Koreans to North Korean refugees. But many South Koreans also reported receiving social support from North Korean refugees. The most common types of support that South Koreans provide to North Korean refugees were often emotional or appraisal support. For example, this quote says in the blue box, "I'm inspired so much when I see that North Korean refugees continue to live bravely after the difficulties they experienced, talk about their past humorously, or try to help other North Korean refugees." This young South Korean woman reported feeling inspired by the passion, bravery, and positivity of North Korean refugees. So my research evolved to focus on the bidirectional support exchange between South Koreans and North Korean refugees. This framework was developed based on the qualitative data. In the top box here, North Korean refugees in human nature adhere to more norms of reciprocity, as illustrated by the proverb, I think this is North Korean proverb, "Receiving is repaying." In North Korea, they learned that when you receive something, you are expected to give something in return. This is a universal moral norm. But after resettling in South Korea, they receive a great deal of support. However, receiving repetitive support nudged some people's consciousness and made them feel uncomfortable. As we can see in this quote, "Receiving help sometimes brings uneasiness because I was born as an independent human with enough capacity to manage my life. But why should I always receive help? Because I lack things and I'm not self-sufficient enough, I want to receive help. But after receiving help, I feel shame. I'm less motivated to work because I'm spoiled with help from here and there." Another similar quote here says, "It could be my guilty conscience, but getting government assistance makes it so hard to ask South Koreans for help. Regardless of what South Korean individuals do to help North Koreans, they might think that we are unhelpful for them. That's why I can't ask others for help even if I really need it. These uncomfortable feelings make some North Korean refugees more independent. This sense of independence was often heightened when they realized that North Korean refugees are not the only individuals who suffer in South Korea. This is illustrated in this quote from a young North Korean man. I used to take help for granted, thinking I'm new to the South, I have nothing. During my third year in South Korea, I lost my business and started doing construction work. There, I had a chance to talk to some South Korean co-workers and got to know that there are so many South Koreans who have a tough life. After I recovered from financial difficulties, I started to volunteer in associations for the disabled and in senior centers. We see that realizing there are South Koreans in the same boat as himself was a significant turning point in practicing reciprocity. Echoing these quotes, South Koreans also reported that North Korean refugees who understand and reciprocate what they have received tend to achieve successful adaptation in South Korea. Here, reciprocity does not have to be strictly a one-to-one ratio. It does not mean that if you receive rice, you must repay with rice. It can involve like showing gratitude for what was received, giving small items in return for larger ones, or even giving something to a third person instead of the original giver. Some North Korean refugees tend to reciprocate towards South Koreans, while others do not. There may be various factors contributing to this distinction. It could be due to personal characteristics, lived experiences, or differing levels of resilience. But one common factor was that North Korean refugees who were sensitive to reciprocity were those who had met diverse South Koreans and engaged in various social interactions with them. This figure illustrates the participant recruitment process in the previous two qualitative study. A total of 30 North Korean refugees participated in the study, represented in blue. At the end of the interview, we asked participants to refer any North Korean refugees or South Koreans in their network for potential study participation. As you can see, only 3 North Korean refugees, I think it's participant number 19, 20, 5 and 27, and they referred South Koreans. Study referral has a different meaning from social network, but it still conveys something. We can think that only a small number of North Korean refugees have close relationship and close social interactions with South Koreans. There are numerous research articles, newspaper articles, and reports related to the mental health of North Korean refugees. The main discourse is that they are vulnerable to mental health issues. Based on my 5 years of clinical experience, this stereotype also persists in the hospital settings. Then how do North Korean refugees perceive themselves? This quote is from my previous research conducted more than 10 years ago, which truly changed my perspective on approaching the health of marginalized population. This 49-year-old woman says like this: "We North Koreans are tough-minded, much like the cold weather up north. We have no idea, you have no idea how strong-willed we are. We came all the way here just to survive, so what could we possibly be unable to do? We are incredibly mentally strong. We've seen and experienced so much just to get here. So no matter how hard it is, we can endure." This quote made me reflect on how to make the most of what one has rather than focusing on what is lacking. To enhance the social adaptation of North Korean refugees, which is closely related to their mental health, community and family support for this population should be strengthened. This can be achieved by expanding and strengthening social support, developing constructive coping strategies, or engaging in livelihood activities. The host community should also think about how they can help North Korean refugees improve social support. Also, utilizing an asset-based approach, focusing on what their strength rather than their weaknesses or vulnerabilities would help in developing interventions and policies that are beneficial for North Korean refugees. This is all I have prepared for the presentation. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so it's neighbors, South Korean neighbors. Of course, it's North Korean refugees who become as soon as they got here in South Korea, they get the citizenship of Republic of Korea. This is pretty rare for the refugees,
That's
right?
true.
And that actually entitle them to be a citizen as well as quite a financial and other support from the government. Okay, but that's not enough. They need to be very proactive. Sometimes very aggressive. To get mingled with South Korean. Just adapting themselves to society, and then but still we think in the role of government. Of course, church and then religious groups, they are doing their best, to help them out, to make for them to be a successful, individual citizen in South Korea and probably the other part of the world. But what is the role of government here? Is for especially improving their mental health. So you say reciprocity. When they come, the government institute must educate more like civic education to be a very successful democratic citizen and a very independent autonomous citizen in South Korea. Or what's the deal from the South Korean government point of view?
I think it's very hard.
Hard.
It's
Educate.
very hard.
You can educate them. No.
Yeah, and I think, again, I'm not the best positioned as a policy recommendation in this aspect, but so I went to New Malden in the UK during my doctoral course because I know Dr. Ji Young-song was a speaker of this lecture.
Sure. Last year.
A couple
She
of
did a good
last
job.
year. I read her article and was very interested in this population in New Malden. So I went there and spent some time in the community. I think it was 2016 or 17. And one thing I was very intrigued about the government's role was that I felt like, I don't know, I didn't compare the policy one-to-one, but I felt like what they described was that UK government required more of the independence. So there were maybe less support, so which may be very difficult for some of the people who really need support. But and maybe the population there is younger, so they sought new opportunity like pioneers. So they are relatively younger than the North Korean refugees in South Korea. So that can be the difference. But these population were required to stand alone earlier than North Korean refugees in South Korea. So I thought that made them, adjust to the society easier compared to North Korean refugees in South Korea. And what North Korean refugees in South Korea are getting is that, so they get the government assistance. If they get more than, or, it's very easy to get rid of this government assistance. Even though they make very small amount of money. So it's like all or none. So if they get all the assistance, or if they work a little bit, then they get none. So I thought that was kind of demotivating for some people to start work and get into the society with barefoot. That start movement was a little bit of demotivating for North Korean refugees in South Korea. So this balance, that government should, find out where the balancing point is. But yeah, this balance is important, I guess.
Very, very delicate task, for the government officials.
Yeah.
All right, I see. So yeah, I mean, according to your suggestion and proposals for the South Korean government, and then we actually have hosted one of the most very rare successful North Korean refugees, who settled in when she was pretty young. She's now doing PhD in the University of California, Riverside. And what she told us in this series, of course, is she made a huge effort, hard work all the time. She was lucky, she said, she's lucky to have a pretty good and a very kind and equal treating classmates and neighbors. But what she said is that she's working very, very hard all the time.
Yeah.
So that actually depends on the individual efforts too. Of course, in governmental and then institutional support, really matters. And then the other, the neighbors, from their hosting society, of course, matters. Their attitude matters. But the most important, region, for them to be successful in the research society is their hard work. And then that's tightly related to, mental health. If you have depression and you have, suffering from the PTSD, you just mentioned, they say you average 3 times of 3 cases of, PTSD in comparison to more like, 0, for the say normal society in people. So it's pretty important, for government and then other institutions to say help them to overcome the mental health issues in the research society. Okay. Thank you for your excellent presentation and then very intriguing explanation and share with us today. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So today we are hosting one of the most inspiring figures in our history, Yonsei University history, the Miss Euna Park, who is doing his PhD studies at the University of California, Riverside right now. Very interesting story herself. At the same time, very successful story herself. Okay, let's listen to her story first, and then we are going to discuss and have a Q&A session. Floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Professor Peck. I'm so honored to be here and share my story about how I resettled in South Korea and come to the US to pursue my PhD degree. So today I first want to briefly introduce my background. I was born in North Korea, in North Hamgyong province. And when I was 10 years old, my mom and I went to China, like many North Korean migrants or defectors. We left because of the severe hunger and famine during 1990s. So before coming to South Korea, I came to South Korea when I was 18 in 2006. Before coming to South Korea, we were in China as illegal migrants. And so we were repatriated to North Korea for 3 times. So as you can tell, my education was constantly interrupted. So I didn't really regularly go to school in China and in North Korea. But once I came to South Korea, I started going to school and learning math and English, everything. So everything was really new and challenging. I felt really lost in the beginning. But gradually, I think, of course, I studied really hard, but due to, the program and support program and institutions facilitated by South Korean government and civil society, I was able to gain and help and support from those people. So I think that part was really helped me to navigate my initial education process. And but I came South Korea, it's like almost 20 years ago. So since then the support program in South Korea has been changed a lot. So when I came here in the beginning, South Korea didn't really have centralized institutions where North Koreans could get support. So Hanawon was the first place I learned English and math. And also after graduating from Hanawon, I went to regular school, high school, right? But at the time, many people told me I should not go to regular school. Instead, I should go to alternative schools run by civil society and NGOs. But I didn't want to go to those schools because I wanted to, make friends with regular South Korean students because I want to be adjusted faster. And I thought if I go to regular school, I could learn a lot and make friends and also learn South Korean culture. So I went there, but many people said I would be bullied by South Korean students. However, I think maybe I was lucky. I didn't get bullied by any of my classmates. They were really nice. And also the teachers were trying to really help me. I remember because I didn't go to private institutions where most South Korean students rely on private tutoring and institutions, but I couldn't afford those institutions. But my teachers, in the school, they really after class, they tried to teach me, help me catch up the subjects and class. So I think because of their help, even though my learning process was really slow, but because of their help, I think I have today, right? Speaking in English and studying in English in the US. So I would advise those students who are in my position, like my position 20 years ago, if they were struggling with class and struggling with anything like making friends, I would suggest that they should really go to teachers and ask for help. And it's different from right now. It's different from 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, South Korea didn't really have the Hana Foundation, which is the centralized institution run by Ministry of Unification. Right now, we have this big, really supportive institution. So the environment, I think, if you seek help, you can find help from those institutions, and they have really good consultation classes and programs. So I really recommend calling them and seeking help. So anyway, through all these help and my hard work, I got into initially Hankuk University of Foreign Studies, Hankuk Wede, and since 1997, I think South Korean government has established a special admission program for North Korean refugees or defectors. So through that program, I was able to get admitted into university. I think without that program, I don't think I could get into the university as I wanted, because first of all, the entrance exam is really challenging, not just for me, but also for most South Korean students. And it requires, enormous efforts and learning and, financial investment, which I don't have those. So through that special program, I was able to get into the university and start my education. And I majored in Chinese because I lived in China before coming to South Korea. So I was really confident in speaking and, learning Chinese. And I thought I could become an interpreter. And it was back 2008, right? 9. During that time, China was really popular. So many people doing business in China, investment and trade was really popular and growing. But I took a class from economics and political science, and I found these subjects were really interesting. And also in order to become interpreter, I needed those background, social science knowledge. So I started taking those classes, and also I got involved in North Korean human rights, movement activism, because I saw people like me who experienced living in China and living in North Korea, and also had an experience of like repatriation. I saw if I share my stories, the global community could push North Korean regime, right, to change, really reform the regime. So I was really passionate about my activism. However, as you know, Kim Jong-il, the former leader of North Korea, died in 2012. And I saw there could be big change because the leader was dead. However, I didn't see any change. So I was really disappointed. And I learned a lesson, right? North Korea, would not change like as I expected, the way I expected, right? Like, there couldn't be any like abrupt change, reform inside North Korea because nobody wants that. And so I wanted to answer these questions. Why, right? Even though the leader was dead, but why global community didn't do anything, or there was no, like so-called revolution inside North Korea. So in order to seek those answers, I started really like getting involved in like studying and researching. So that was one of my motivation to, pursuing master's at Yonsei and then pursuing PhD in the U.S. So after having the identity crisis, I was asking questions about my belonging, and I really started asking, who am I, right? As we call North Korean defectors, 탈북자. Sometimes we call refugees, but some people say migrants. So all those, really contested identities and names, I started questioning myself. So those questions, I think, led me to study migration and identity, how, globalism and neoliberalism really shape not only just the resettlement, but also the identity of migrants in South Korea and across, beyond the South Korea, I think. So my dissertation is about this, and I'm examining how, the division between North Korea and South Korea and neoliberalism, these two intersect and shape North Koreans' identity and inclusion. And also I study Chinese Koreans because I think Chinese Koreans we have studied them separately, but I think that they share a lot of common in the context of, globalization and neoliberalism. So I study both groups together in my dissertation. So thank you so much for listening to my personal story and how I become pursuing PhD in the US. If you have questions, I would love to answer any questions you might have. Thank you so much for your time and listening.
Thank you for your interesting story. Very intriguing and inspiring story. You're studying in the United States, pursuing your PhD. I think this is a pretty remarkable achievement, for yourself. And my first question is about your family and your mom and your relatives. What's the role of your mom and other, say, people in your community?
I think for my mom, she's an incredible human being. I think she didn't really advise me like how to, navigate my life because she was new to South Korea, right? So she didn't have any knowledge, and also she was too busy to, go to work and make money. So financially, she supported me a lot, but also like through her life, I think she showed, strength and resilience, and like whenever you have a hard time, she teaches me like you shouldn't stop pursuing what you want. So she was like my role model. And also, for many North Korean parents, they don't know how to give advice. They didn't grow up in South Korea and they don't really understand the system. Like they don't know, right? Even though they want to support their kids, but they don't. I think they don't know how to. So I think my mom was one of them. But I think just being there and stay with me and always like be on my side was really, that was enough for me. And then I felt really safe because of her. And then I could go outside and seek help from others, right? Like my teachers and, civil society and NGOs and even the government. So
yeah, I think that really your mom is another very remarkable and inspiring person in my view.
Yeah.
And I think you need to thank her, of course. And I think
Yes.
your family for everybody, but family really matters in any
Right.
and especially
Right.
just like North Korean refugees. And if you have lucky to have your family member in
Right.
then that's a different story. All right, good. So then, that leads me to, my next questions. Do you expect that, more young North Korean refugees who settle in Korea, of course, they settle in other countries too, but you settle, South Korea now and in the near future become successful just like you? Do you think many people, young North Korean refugees, can do that? Or probably you might be an outlier or exceptional case?
I don't think I'm an outlier because so I came to the US through Fulbright program, and the Fulbright Korea, I think it's been around almost I think 8 years, 7-8 years. They have the special program for North Korean refugees who wanted to study and pursue master's and PhD in the US. So through that, program, I think whoever wants to apply for that program, I think they can. But at the same time, I don't think everyone has to, pursue PhD, right?
Of course not.
It's difficult task. You can use your time and your, energy to somewhere else instead of studying. But if, any North Korean refugees or descendants of North Korean refugees, if they want to really become academic and the scholars, then I think they could apply for that program. But of course, they have to do their homework, right? So study hard, and English should be one of the biggest hurdle for them, and still for me. So
good. Yeah. Well, being a professor or policy analyst in a very prestigious think tank, it's another one line of career path. But there are a lot more career paths for the refugees, young refugees, and their second generations. Of course, you can be a startup businessman or can be a journalist, can be YouTubers, and
there are so many jobs.
Sure. That's but the thing is, those successful people need some support. What do you think the most essential formal and informal institutions, for these young kids, from North Korea or second generation of the young refugees to be successful on more time in South Korea and other parts of the world?
I would say, I think, financial support is really essential. Of course, like you need money, right? Financial support to do everything essentially. But I think information network, I think it's really essential. So network, it's not something that government can, really do, right? Like government can establish policies, but those policies has have to be, delivered through the agencies, right? Local agencies, local NGOs, and local, government. So I think that network was really important. So for North Korean refugees, especially for people above, older than 40, after 40, they're too busy to work, so they don't really have time to, to become socialized in South Korea. So I think because of that, for them, they don't really gain, knowledge and information and what to do with their kids, right? So to give advice and to really educate their kids, they need advice and informal network like neighborhood or churches even. I think these informal institutions really can approach them and help and deliver those information. And also for younger people like me, my generation or younger than me, still I think network and information is really important. So it's because who whom you talk to, whom you socialize, it changes your life, right? Your identity and your path.
And then now you are studying, minority politics and then immigration politics in the United States. And then your major is interesting, at the same time has a lot of implication for North Korean refugees too. But not just North Korean refugees, but also the other types of refugees. For example, from the North Africa and then, West Africa, a lot of, refugees from this area to, Western European country, Eastern European country, and then Southeast Asia also, Rohingya people, from the Myanmar, and then lots of, economic, migrants or refugees, from the Central and then Southeast Asia, South American, countries to the United States, Canada. How do you distinguish, between the North Korean refugees and defectors and 이탈주민 and other types of refugees, from your political science and, other social science background point of view?
North Korean refugees, defectors, migrants, we are in many ways different from other refugee groups. I think North Korea, the country is not so from the push perspective. I think we have a push and pull factor. It's simple, but it's useful, right? So push perspective, I think North Korea is not a country, right? Where you can just, when I want to leave this country, then leave. It's not that type of country, right? So it's oppressive and really, surveillance heavy country. But we see, North Koreans, even though the number has decreased a lot recently, but we see, their movement, right? They move to China. So I think that tells some stories about the brokerage, informal institutions, right? Brokerage, and sometimes those brokerages can be human trafficking, network. Those, network really is the key role. These networks are playing the key role in bringing out, the people from North Korea and sending in messages. And also, through the brokerage, many North Koreans are sending money to their family. And so those money also, money and information also motivate their family, like a chain migration, right? Motivate them come to the country. But those, informal networks and underground brokerages, I think we also seen this in other refugee communities, right? So when you move, you need information and money and network. So that applies to every group. So from that angle, I think North Korean migration is not too different from other migrant groups, right? But in terms of settlement, I think South Korean government has invested a lot of, not just money, but also human resource in investing in, North Korean refugee resettlement. From that resettlement perspective, we are not really refugees, right? We are treated as citizens, right? So because of the constitution. So from that perspective, I think we are different from other refugees because they don't have, a country, divided a country where they could be treated as autonomous citizens. They have to go to different country, and their settlement is not as smooth as North Korean due to lack of, support and resource. So I think from that perspective, we are on the better side because we just receive legal and economic protection. But still, that doesn't mean that we don't face discrimination. So discrimination and identity, crisis and all these and trauma, I think these are all shared by any refugee groups. So there are differences and similarities. I will stop here, but I'm just talking on top of my head.
Yeah, sure.
Right now,
Sorry, I just become a professor one more time just to ask you a very difficult question for your research, and I think that's not very fair for this type of interview. Good, but your answer was excellent. There is the similarities and distinctions, and the similarity, of course, it's a lot of political situation and the economic, social treatment. At the same time, there is a very important distinction between North Korean defectors, 이탈 주민, and other types of refugees, and then Constitution of Republic of Korea actually guarantee North Korean defectors, refugees, 이탈 주민 immediately become a citizen of Republic of Korea. That actually guarantee a lot. Good. Yeah, so that's good. So is my last question.
Yes.
Yeah. What's your plan? Getting PhD from the University of Riverside. You are expecting that, completing your PhD next year. That's what you plan.
Next year.
Yeah. What are you going to do?
I'm on job market this year, like starting this year. But I will finish next year. So I want to be in academic field and be scholars of continuing researching and teaching. So I will apply everywhere that has a job. Everywhere, like Korea, Taiwan or everything. Because the job market is not looking good, right? And then at the same time, I think could also apply to other research institutions, not just to universities. So I will see. But I think I will continue whenever I will be in next few years. But I think I will continue researching and doing research jobs.
Yeah, I mean, you are sounds like survivor and a winner all the time. So I hope your future is in like that in the next at least a few decades. All right, and then wherever you go, in the United States or Korea or Taiwan or Western European countries or somewhere else, I hope you best. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.